And to differentiate the lesson, we're going to be using Google Classroom. And most likely, when we get started, we're not getting started back in our classrooms the way it looks. We're going to be doing virtual lessons. And so we're going to be using Google Classroom as the vehicle to share the content. And so what I'm asking that you do is I want you to join a Google Classroom with me. So I want you to look at my screen. I'm going to go ahead and hit present now. And again, thank you so much for turning off your video. It makes it easier, it makes it faster for my system to switch out between the different tabs. Now you should be able to see my screen right now. I'm going to open up and go into a Google Classroom. And the Google Classroom is S2 for session 2, and it's for this session of Nearpod Differentiate Virtual Stations. I'm going to put the code up. The code is 2A6HZJS. And so what I want you to do is on the top where your web browser, you have that little plus sign, where you can add a new tab. Well, you can open up a new tab, keep that Google Meet going because I don't want you to leave the room, but I want you to join this Google Classroom. And so that way I can show you how to differentiate the lessons. And I'm using the Google Classroom as that vehicle. So the code is 2A6HZJS. So go ahead and please join this Google Classroom for me because I want you to experience it as a student. I want you to see it. And we're going to be bouncing back and forth. There are a lot of times I say, hey, go to my Google Meet tab. That way you can see my screen. There are going to be times when you're going to be going to your Nearpod tab to see it as a student. So be ready to bounce between the different tabs. And it's also a good strategy to do this with your students. So you can still talk with them, you can still guide them, but yet they can still be in the Nearpod, or they can be in whatever resource you have them to go, but they can still hear your voice. The Google Classroom that I want you to join is 2A6HZJS. 2A6HZ as in zebra, JS. It's 10:24 now. I'm going to give just about a minute to make sure everybody has the opportunity to get in the class. The code is 2A6HZJS. 2A6HZJS. All right, let me close this out. I'm going to take a look in the people just to see my numbers. All right, thank you so much. It looks like we pretty much have everybody. I'm going to go back into the stream one more time. The code is 2A6HZJS. So this is a Google Classroom. Now keep that Google Classroom tab open. And when you look at the tabs at the top, you're going to notice that you have that little blue icon where it says S2 Nearpod to differentiate. So when we go back to the Google Classroom, that's where you would go. But right now, I want you to go into the Meet side. Do you see where he has that, like the little green speech bubble, and it says Meet, UDN? Click on that so you can see my screen. And I'm going to go to my Nearpod. So you should be seeing my screen, and you should see my Nearpod lesson library. And the lesson that we're going to be going through, this could be, and if you're a high school teacher, I want you to imagine that this is a high school lesson. If I'm elementary, middle school, it's not actually about the lesson. It's about the process and how we use it. But I wanted you to see a lesson first, and then we'll modify that lesson. And the lesson we're going to be doing is adding and subtracting fractions. And notice when I hover over this lesson, this Nearpod, I have two options. I could do a live lesson or a student paced. That live lesson, what that means is I, as a teacher, will manually take you to each different slide, and we can talk about it and go through it. Student paced means that the students, when they click on that link or they go to that Nearpod, they go through it on their own without the support of the teacher taking them through the Nearpod lesson. That's the big difference. And I'm going to be doing this as a live lesson. So I'm going to click on the live lesson link. And when I click on it, you're going to see it open. Give it a minute to set. And it has a code, kind of like what you did with Google Classroom, but we're not going to use the code. I'm going to share this with you in a different way. But I do want you to notice something. You have different ways to share that Nearpod lesson. I can email it. I can use social media. I can use a link, Google Classroom. I can use Remind and Microsoft Teams. But let's just pretend for a moment that I'm going to share this with a group of students, not my whole class. And I'm not going to complete that. We're going to use it a different way, but I want you to see that process. So when I click on Google Classroom, remember Google Classroom is the vehicle. And I'm going to pretend that this is a student-paced lesson. And I click on Google Classroom, and I want to give it this lesson to specific students in my class. So when I click on it, it opens up my Google Classroom because it's tied to my Google account. And when I hit choose class, I pick the class that you're in, the session 2 Nearpod to differentiate your lessons. And when I click choose action here, I'm going to make it as an assignment, and I hit go. So it opens up in Google Classroom that shared capability of how I'm going to give it into who. So I would put the title, of course. I would put instructions. Maybe I want you to go through the Nearpod. I'll be taking this for a grade. Do the best you can, that kind of a thing. But notice on the right, notice where it says all students. When I click on that, it shows all of you that are in my classroom. So when I take off the check mark to all students, then I have the list of my students, and I can give this Nearpod to that Tier 3 group of students, my Tier 2 group of students, my Tier 1 students, or those different small groups that I'm specifically focusing in on. And that's how you use Google Classroom to share to the specific groups. I'm not going to actually do it that way. I'm going to do it as a whole group. And I'm going to use Google Meet to get you into that Nearpod. So I'm going to use this link capability. So when I click on the link, it opens up a second page, and there's the link. It highlights it for me. I can click copy. So it's copied. I'm going to close this. I'm going to go into that Meet meeting with you, and I'm going to paste it in the chat. So once it's in the chat, what I want you to do is I want you to click on it so that it opens up a new tab in that Nearpod lesson. So when I go ahead and click on the chat here, I'm going to go down in and I'm going to paste it. I'm going to send out that link. And so when you click on that link, it's going to open up a new tab in Nearpod. Now, don't close the other tabs. I still need these going. I need those to be going for you. And I'm going to go to the Nearpod side. Now, I show that we have 40. Subtracting my sharing screen, myself and Claudia, that means we have about 37. So I'm going to go back into the Nearpod. When you click on that link, you notice it opens up a new tab. It puts you into Nearpod, and you see the light blue screen, and it's adding and subtracting fractions. And as we're waiting for everybody to join, if you're already in, go in the Meet side, because I want you to see that in the bottom left corner, it has a group of people, and I see the numbers that are in that Nearpod. Right now we have 15. I know we should have about 37. So go ahead and go back to make sure you're in the Meet. If you haven't clicked on that link yet, if you're on the Nearpod side, go ahead and go back to that one. Make sure you're on that one if you're already in. So what you should be seeing in the screen is the blue adding and subtracting fractions. But remember, you're not on the Meet side. You're on that new tab that it created when you click on the link. And this is a grade 6 warm-up activity. This is a lesson where we're going back into, we're a 6th grade teacher, and we're going to see if the students understand adding and subtracting fractions. And I want you to go through this as if you were a student. Then we're going to go back and modify this lesson. We're going to go ahead and set it up to differentiate with my different groups of students. We're up to 24. Let's go ahead and wait a moment longer. Let's get everybody in. And just as a heads up, this is not my Nearpod lesson. I grabbed it from the lesson library in Nearpod. I modified it a little bit. I tweaked it a little bit, but this is not a lesson that I created on my own, just as a heads up. And so this is the front page. Now, this is a live Nearpod lesson, so that means when I go to the next slide, it's going to move on your side also. Make sure you're on the Nearpod tab at the top, not the Meet. So when I click on that arrow, it's going to take it to an open-ended question. Now, the question is, it shows you a math problem, 2/5 plus 1/2. And the student should have started to get this in the previous year in 5th grade. And the question is, imagine your friend is stuck on how to begin solving the following problem. What is the first step you would recommend they take? So what's the first thing we need to do with this fraction to be able to add them? And the fraction is 2/5 plus 1/2. Take a moment. I know it's a summer day, summer morning, and I'm making you think. Larry, how dare you? Again, I just want you to participate and see this lesson as a student. So when I differentiate it, you can see how it makes a difference. Now we're at about 21% of us has put in their answer. And that's what I like about Nearpod. You can hold your students accountable as they go. It's a great tool to use when you're in your Meet with your students and you're doing a live session. And what I really like about Nearpod is that it has so many lessons that you can grab. And once you have it, you can modify that lesson. You can make it your own. I like to call it, you aestheticize the lesson. All right, let me share one of the answers with you. So I can go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and open it up, and I'm going to hit share. So here we have a person that says, find the common denominator first, which is 10. Let's take a look at let me share that with you. And this was same thing, find a common denominator before you add. So we got it. We got to find that common denominator first. Then we can make it. It's different. It's apples and oranges until we find that common denominator. Now, in the next slide, this is a draw it. And in the background, it has 2/3 plus 1/4. And in your own words, write the steps you would take to solve this problem. And this is a draw it. So what you can do is you can use the pencil tool, and you can actually write with the trackpad. Some of us are good with that, and we're good. And notice the bottom left, you have that T. Well, if you click on it, and you can click into the screen, you can actually type the steps. As a teacher, you can see the students work as they go. And just like Nearpod, whatever we do at the end of the lesson when we're done, a teacher could go into that lesson, go to reports, and take a look individually how their students have done. And either by grades, if it is for a grade, take a look at assessments. There's just so much that they can do. And I'm going to apologize now. First off, I probably am not going to give you enough time to complete each part. But going back, I want you to go ahead and just experience this as a student. All right, let me just give it a moment longer. Very good. Some of us are showing pictures, images. They're showing numbers. I see some Sharon Wells stuff. Very good. And so this works across the board with our curriculum. I'm going to jump to the next slide, and I apologize for those of you that are not finished. In the next slide, we're going to solve the given problem, and I want you to show all your steps. The other one is kind of like just putting in the steps, but here you're going to actually solve the subtraction problem. You have 2/5 minus 1/3. Solve the given problem, but show all your steps. Now, it might be different if you're at Sharon Wells School. If not, but I want you to go ahead and show your steps. Right. So you got the idea. Again, I'm apologizing. I'm going through this fast. Of course, you're not going to be doing this with your students in this speed, but this is going through a lesson. And do you see how you can do this with your students in Google Meet, using Google Meet and Nearpod together for a live lesson, a whole group? Again, you might do this in a meet with a smaller group of students. You're going to meet with this group at this certain specific time while the others are working on something else. So you can have a virtual mini group with your students also, a whole group. And you can have your other groups of students working on something else. Now, let's go into the next slide. We're done. Again, this was just to see if you're able to do this and if you're successful. I'm going to go ahead and end this session. Now, are you sure on the end? I'm going to put yes. And now what I want you to do is I want you to go to the Meet side. Right now you were on the Nearpod side. It went to the main Nearpod screen. But on the top tab, I want you to go to the Meet. You can see my screen right now, and I'm right now in my Nearpod lesson library. And in that library, I have adding and subtracting fractions. This is the one that we just did. And I'm going to go in, and when I grabbed it, I did modify a little bit, but let's just say I was focusing in on my middle group of students. Those students that are not the tier 1, they're not the tier 3, but they're in that middle group. And so I want to modify this lesson. I want to change it up. I wanted to add some support components for my tier 3 students. But as I'm doing this, I want you to think about, how about my tier 1? What can I do to modify this lesson for my tier 1? And once I pull it down into my lesson library, I can click on it and notice the 3 dots at the top right corner of that lesson. When I click on it, and just a heads up, if I wanted to grade things, I wanted to take a look at your work, I could go into reports and take a look at that. But I want you to notice where it says duplicate. We want to duplicate that lesson. I'm going to take that middle Nearpod lesson, make a copy of it, and make it different. I'm going to differentiate it for a specific group of students. So I'm going to click duplicate. And notice how it says adding and subtracting fractions and has the number 1 on it. So I'm going to pick off the 1, and I'm just going to put a T next to it. A T. Kind of like for tigers, but I don't, so my kids don't know if this is tier 1 group, it's tier 3. There's nothing identifying this for my tier 3 students. And so here I have my lesson. I remember how I duplicated it. So the other one, the middle group lesson, is ready to go. It's good. But notice I have add slide. So I'm going to add support components. I'm going to add things to it to make it so it supports that tier 3 group of students. I'm going to add support materials to it. So I click add slide. And in Nearpod, there's 2 different types of slides. Content means that there are slides that the students look at. There's students that they can manipulate a little bit. But basically, it's this information that they're getting. Activities means that there's something that they have to do. And if I wanted to, I can create a special quiz for that tier 3 group in the activity side. I can add different draughts because I want them to do that kind of a thing. But I'm going to go to content, and I want to find a video that will help my tier 3 students. Give them that little extra support. So I'm going to click on video. And to add video, there's 2 different locations I can add video from. I can bring it in from YouTube. Now, I want you to think different on that also. As a teacher, we have a resource called Screencastify. And what Screencastify does, it allows us to record on our computer a video, and maybe I create a video, that extra support video for that tier 3 group of students, or tier 1 or my tier 2. So I can create videos using Screencastify also, just as a heads up. Now, when I click on YouTube, I'm going to search YouTube for a video to support students in adding fractions. So I'm going to type in adding fractions. And you're looking for that gem. You're looking for a video that your students would be able to use. And it looked like it can work. And so I do a search, and it's going to pop a list of videos that comes out. And as a teacher, you're going to start looking for those videos. And here's what's nice is once you have your differentiated lessons ready to go, you have them from then on, and you can use them. So let's say I'm going to go in and I'm going to look at these videos. So I go in, I click on one, and I preview the video.
Adding fractions with different denominators.
If it's too small, I could take it to whole screen.
Last time, when we added fractions that have a common denominator, we learned that we keep the denominator and just add the numerators. That's easy enough. This time, we'll add these fractions with different denominators.
Now, I'm going to pretend that I watched the whole video, and it's good. And as a teacher, if you're going to give videos to your students, watch the entire video. Things can happen. Remember Momo, where people would take a video, download it, add something into it, most of the time inappropriate, and then re-upload it back with the hope that people would watch it, kids will watch it. And it's just, we got to be careful about student safety. But I'm going to pretend that I watch the entire video, I select this video, and then I hit save. So now I have that video to support my students. And I put it at the end, but I want to move it up into that area just before the open-ended question, that first one. That way the students will watch a video and say, oh, okay, this is what I need to do. I got to make sure that they have common denominators. So you give them that extra support. And so I'm thinking, okay, but I don't think it's enough. I want to give them something else. I want to give it to them in a different way. And so I'm going to go back and I'm going to hit add slide. But again, I could be doing this for my tier 1 group. I could just give it to them in a different way. But on this one, I want you to notice web content. Maybe I found a website, maybe CK12. I found a site, I went to Khan Academy, and there's a section in Khan Academy that I want to give to my students as they're going through this Nearpod. So I can click on web content, paste the website here, and then hit save. And then when they click the link in Nearpod, it takes them to that location. So I can use different resources to also differentiate this lesson. I'm not going to save it. And that's something else I can do. Flocabulary. Now, I like Flocabulary because our students love music. And when you have that rhythm and you see that lesson, they start to get the rhythm of it. They see it, but it helps them to remember and take in that lesson. Let me show you how that works. So I'm going to click Flocabulary. And it has in different content areas. So let's go math. And I'm going to do a search for adding fractions. And here I have equivalent fractions, dividing fractions, and here I have adding fractions. Let me show you what it's like. And I am going to show you the video. I'm going to hit preview. Give it a moment to load. And just remember, it's hip-hop music to fractions. I'm going to hit play.
Vocabulary. Let's add these fractions up. liquid. The numerator is the number on top. Denominator is down, down, low. When you add fractions, you need to stop. Make sure the denominators are good to go. We need to make the denominators the same. Otherwise, adding them would be insane. So we multiply each fraction top and bottom by the denominator of its buddy. We do it to the top and the bottom, so the value doesn't change. Yeah, you got them. Yeah, we do that to both of these guys. Multiply by the bottom of the buddy, alright? Our denominators are now the same. And when we add fractions, they don't change. Add numerators like 10 plus 16, but keep the denominator the same thing. Multiply the bottom and the top by the opposite denominator. Keep the bottom the same, but add the top. We ain't steady, adding if you're ready or not. Multiply the bottom and the top by the opposite denominator. Keep the bottom the same, but add the top. We ain't steady, adding if you're ready or not. Let's try it on, see if it fits. Let's add 1/4 and 2/5. First we take the 5 and multiply both the top and the bottom on the other side. We get 5 over 20, that's equal to 1/4. Yeah, you get me. Then we take the 4 from before, multiply the other side, yeah, for sure. We get 8 over 20, that's still equal to 2/5, but get ready. Now we keep the 20 the same, but we add 8 and 5, okay? 13 over 20, yeah, that's the truth. Now we make sure that it's reduced and simplified, so our fraction is nice. We're adding fractions and we're doing it right. Multiply the bottom and the top by the opposite denominator. Keep the bottom the same, but add the top. We ain't steady, adding if you're ready or not. Multiply the bottom and the top by the opposite denominator. Keep the bottom the same, but add the top. We ain't steady, adding if you're ready or not. And when you subtracting, it's the same thing. Just follow all the steps, but subtract the numerators. You got it? Yeah, you got it.
All right. I bet you didn't think you'd be watching listen to a hip hop song doing denominators and fractions. But the point is, we want to reach out to our students in a way that they can learn. And we know our students like this music, and it taps into something that helps them to learn. Let's go for it. So if I want to add this, I go ahead and I click on the add. And notice how it added it to the bottom. So this time, I have that video to support them on this open-ended question, but I want them to watch the Flocabulary and listen to it before they do the 2 draw-its. The goal is, again, student learning and success. And we're developing this lesson for that Tier 3 students. Now, there's also called PhET simulations. And maybe my students need to kind of review a little bit on the fractions and see it with the shapes to get the concept and the ideas. So we're going to add another one. So I'm going to go to the top, add slide. And it's under content. So when I hit PhET simulation, I have different simulations. Now, PhET simulations are in math and science. So I'm going to go ahead and click elementary school math. And I'm going to go down and I'm going to look for there you go. Let's go with fraction matcher, fractions. And I'm going to hit done. Well, let's preview it. Look, let me show you what it looks like. Let's take it to full screen. And here we have the different levels. With a PhET simulation, when they go in, the students do this on their own. That means it's like a self-assessment without the stress of a grade or without anybody watching them. They just do this on their own. Students will go, if I have a small group of students and they're working on this, I might have some students go to level 2. I might have some students going to level 8. But they have the option. So let's take a look at level 2. So when I click on it, notice how it has the fractions with an image, and they're trying to find the two that match. Because when they're adding the fractions, I wanted them to see that it's 1/4 and 2/8 are different in the way they're broken up. And so I want them to have that visual image. So here I have 2/4. So I move it up into the tray. And I find, oh, here's 2/4 of the image. And then I can do a check. If they're right, hey, I'm good. And then notice how it goes to the top. And they go through all the different parts, and then they go into the next level. So here I have 1/3. And let's be wrong this time. I do a check. Uh-oh. Try again. So you kind of get the idea with the simulation. So this is a way for a student to get practice in a comfortable environment. Let me go ahead and zoom this down. And I want that tier 3 group to review this, because I want them to see that the fractions are not just numbers that they're adding, but they're actually shapes and parts, and that way they can see it. So I'm going to hit done. And then that adds to my lesson. And here's that simulation. So I'm going to add that to the very beginning, even before that open-ended question. So that way, when they see the fraction, they can also see the shapes and the parts of the whole. And then I hit save and exit. So when I go back, and it takes me back to my Nearpod library. Yes, ma'am?
You have about 5 minutes.
Okay. So I'm back here. Now, notice the T, again, that I kept in mind for the tier 3 group. So I want to give that to my tier 3 students. Remember how I do that? So I go ahead, and they're going to do this one in a small group. So I go student paste, or it could be a live lesson that I do with my small group of students with me there supporting them. It's your call. I'm going to click. I want all the students to do all the different submissions. I want to make sure that they answer everything before they go on to the next slide. Notice the calendar. I can set the date and how long this Nearpod is active. I can narrow it down to a couple of days, or I can make it a month. It's your call. But I'm going to use Google Classroom to share. Remember how Google Classroom is the vehicle that we share the content with? So I can hit Google Classroom. Just going to go back into my Google Classroom. I choose class. Remember, you're all in session 2, Nearpod, to differentiate your lesson. So I click on it. Choose action. I'm going to make it an assignment. And then I hit go. Of course, I put a title to it, instructions, but let me open this up a little bit so you can see it better. So this is going to be going into your group, our class. But notice the all students. When I click that caret down, that arrow, disclosure arrow, Right now it goes to everybody. But I don't want to give it to everybody. I want to give it to a small group. So I click away from all students. And then from here, I can click that small group of students that I want to focus in on. But so that y'all see it, I'm going to put it to all. Again, I just want you to see it in Google Classroom, how that looks. But here's the magic of it. If I give my Tier 3 students one Nearpod, I give my GT students another Nearpod, and my middle group a Nearpod, or however I'm going to group them, and I do it in Google Classroom by specific students, nobody knows that they got something different unless they talk with each other. But this is a great way to differentiate the content. Now, very quickly, you notice how I put where you can put in a web page, a link. Well, there's resources that we have. We have like CK12 that we can find lessons. And I give that one lesson, that one support component to my GT group. I go into Khan Academy and I find a lesson in Khan Academy, and I click on it and I put it to my middle group. So I can do it that way. But I want you to also, in Google Classroom, when you create a lesson, if I go into classwork and I do it directly, so let's say I'm going to create an assignment, and adding fractions. I can put watch video or whatever it is. I hit add here, and notice I can add different components. But again, notice the all students over here. So it doesn't have to be Nearpod that I differentiate the components with. I could use Nearpod, but I can do it directly in Google Classroom. So I know this 45 minutes is fast. We can do this a lot longer and go deeper into the different resources and how to do that. But I wanted you to see a taste of it on how to differentiate using Nearpod and other resources in a way to make that small groups. So let's go back into the meet. I'm going to stop sharing. We have, 2 minutes, and I apologize.